Welcome back. House Republicans will deliver the impeachment articles against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas this afternoon, to the Senate. The House Judiciary Committee is pushing Mayorkas to hand over documents which relate to illegal migrants who've been accused of serious crimes. Jordan wants to know their background. Chairman Jim Jordan saying that DHS's failure to provide the committee with these requested documents is unacceptable, and it prevents the committee from fulfilling its constitutional oversight obligations. Joining me now is Indiana Senator Mike Braun, a ranking member of the Senate Aging Committee, as well as a member of the Budget, Agriculture, and Housing, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. Senator, thanks very much for being here.
Morning.
What's the story here in terms of getting these documents to understand the backgrounds of some of these migrants? Why does Jim Jordan want these? And do you know if you've heard back from Mayorkas yet on this? Because if you've got a really bad rap sheet, we should know about it, right? Before you actually come here and start committing crimes in this country.
I think this is a case where they've drugged their feet on all that kind of underlying evidence. And the fact is, until you actually force them to a point like this, they can keep doing all that delay, not giving them the full information. I think this thing has reached number one, Maria, because it's the biggest issue politically. Of course, they're going to do everything within their power, parliamentary, procedurally, to try to sweep it under the rug. But it had to get to this point. You see how difficult it is to flush any information out of this Biden administration. They, on the other hand, weaponize their agencies, go after things that are different through executive orders and rules. They know how to use the system. We generally are too defensive. It came to a point, though, where if you didn't deliver these articles of impeachment, if these aren't high crimes and misdemeanors, open borders, national security threat, even the Canadian borders being breached in a way because you can get by with it, I don't know what would be.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, but I'd like to know what's going on in the Senate, frankly, because, you know, we're talking about all these things that seem to die in the Senate, like, for example, the impeachment articles against Alejandro Mayorkas. They're going to be delivered to the Senate today. Then what happens?
So you can have these things die or they can prosper depending on the attitude of who the majority leader is. I've always been a believer here that Democrats are faster-footed. Rahm Emanuel never let a crisis go to waste. That's what all the inflation and stuff around COVID was built around. Here, on something more particular, we have to do a better job of building the case. But now that it's here, let's watch Schumer. Let's see if he violates everything that's been done in the 21 impeachment articles delivered, only 4 of which were dismissed because the individual left office. Never has there been a motion to table that's been approved in the other 17. He is a political enterpriser. They are bold with what they think they can get by with. I think parliamentary, they're going to try to shove it into the drawer from the moment they arrive over here this afternoon.
Well, I mean, what do you think about all of this conversation about money to Ukraine, money to Israel, money to Taiwan, and you still haven't secured the border? Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted out a minute ago, no, I'm not voting for the rule on Johnson's bundle of funding bills for billions more to Ukraine and other foreign wars. But the White House has been very clear. It will veto any spending package that does not include Ukraine. I'll tell you, some of your colleagues are getting real frustrated. I spoke with Kentucky Senator Rand Paul Sunday. Listen to what he said about Mike Johnson, the House Speaker.
What I would say to Speaker Johnson is hold your ground, show some cojones, show some intestinal fortitude, for goodness sakes. You've already passed aid to Israel. Tell Chuck Schumer when he's ready to take it up, and it's going to be paid for.
So what about that, Senator? You've got an aid to Israel bill right there on Chuck Schumer's desk. What are you going to do about it in the Senate?
Not to mention, it's paid for. Nothing around here is paid for. Again, you cannot force that to the floor without Schumer orchestrating it. And they will use every tool to avoid that, spin it, just like they're going to try to get rid of the articles of impeachment because they feel they can get by with it. The only resolution to all of this, Maria, sadly, is when you've orchestrated like the open borders crassly to get more political votes in the future, is vote out the people that run the government, like like that. When you know how to use the Senate rules and you're bold as a political enterpriser, you try to get by with it. Democrats generally do. We are sheepish about doing it.
So is this the main focus then until Memorial Day? This is your last push for legislative action before the November elections. I mean, come on, right? I mean, this is it. So is this the priority now for the next 6 weeks or whatever? Money to Ukraine, money to Israel, money to Taiwan?
It will be, because I think they're going to flip the switch quickly on impeachment. We can't let that go away as an issue. It's the biggest one out there.
Yeah.
And when it comes to Ukrainian aid and so forth, hold firm there. We, as 41 of us, of the 49 Republicans, can always block moving forward on this stuff. Will we weaken? Will we hold our ground? And let's see how hard Schumer's willing to push when there is a bill already passed in the House that would help Israel, and it would have been paid for. We got to articulate that better. That sometimes gets into the weeds. They do it better than we do. We got to get better at it.
Well, I'll tell you, you wouldn't know that Chuck Schumer is the senior Jewish person in the Congress, would you? I mean, he's right there running the Senate, and he's Jewish. I don't see the priority here for Israel. But I want to move on to the other policies that seem to be failing with the American people. Axios is out with a new piece, Biden's new take on inflation. Trump would be worse. Oh, really? The inflation rate was 1.4% when Trump handed the White House over to Joe Biden. We've repeatedly seen this administration blame the former president for skyrocketing inflation, despite the fact that this president and the Democrats spend money recklessly, too many dollars chasing too few goods. My colleague Edward Lawrence tried to get an answer out of KJP the other day on this. Watch this.
The president said that when he came into office, inflation was skyrocketing, but it was 1.4% in January of 2021, and that was the 11th consecutive month at that time under 2%. So was the president misleading Americans?
When the president took office, and you know this, there was a pandemic. It was closing down businesses, closing down schools, and so it was drastically disrupting the supply chain.
The president didn't say the supply chain was being disrupted. He said inflation was skyrocketing.
We had a supply chain that was disrupted. And so that's what the president was speaking to and laying out.
Is the president being honest about inflation?
The president had to take historic action, take aggressive action in dealing with our disruption in the supply chain.
Supply chain, Senator. She's going to turn herself into a pretzel trying to blame inflation on Trump, even though we know better because we've all lived it. And by the way, you know what she failed to say about the pandemic was forcing closings? No. The administration told the schools to stay, the kids to stay home. The administration forced us to do all this stuff about COVID. It wasn't just, it just happened because of a pandemic. They told us what to do.
You know, it's ironic, my first visit there on supply chain issues, of course, Biden, I think, was using note cards that day. I don't think he was really into the issue. Again, this is going to be easier, should be, than the border. They've got their dream. The federal government and government in general is about 25% of our GDP, never been more than 20%. They have grown most of these jobs through government jobs. We've pushed out private business investment to a smaller percentage of our economy. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that's why we had low inflation back then. This ought to be easier. If anybody's done any finance 101 here in their background, look at macroeconomics, to refute it. And again, it amazes me even more how they think they can spin that tale.
Yeah.
We have got something that we've never had before, and thank goodness Jerome Powell, Jamie Dimon, finally over the last month or two have said our federal debt and the high interest cost is going to be the biggest drag on our economy. So you've got two people that know finance that have said the opposite, and inflation isn't going away. It's getting worse because when you borrow and spend, you displace the real economy with more government, with workers that don't even come here to work. That is not productive. We got to do a better job of making the case. This ought to be easier than the border.
I'll tell you, I mean, this administration, you know, really must think everybody's stupid. All you have to do is look at what has taken place in the last 3 years. Inflation Reduction Act, which did not reduce inflation. These are all oxymorons. It did not reduce inflation. Fiscal Responsibility Act was hardly fiscally responsible, okay? Forgiveness of student debt, also fiscally irresponsible. The CHIPS Act, the green energy tax grants. I mean, it goes on and on and on, Senator. When will it stop?
Fancy names with one intended purpose. They pulled that off to replace more of the real economy with the unproductive side of the ledger, government spending. Full of a deep state, bureaucrats, it hurts the economy. The real proof in the pudding is, look at what happened before, pre-Biden, pre-COVID versus what they've given us. Easy way to vote in November.
Senator, thank you. We'll be watching. We appreciate your time this morning. Senator Mike Braun is in D.C. this morning, and we'll be right back.